Hi, my name is Chris Parkhurst. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'm also the host of the Documentary Life podcast, a show that spans 140 episodes, has been downloaded in over 135 countries, and I've been producing for about 5 years. I decided to put each and every episode up here onto YouTube to sort of expand the audience, and as we say in the show, maybe inspire and inform some more doc filmmakers, hopefully like yourself. In the episodes, you may find some older, maybe outdated URLs, in particular, any of the documentary filmmaking courses that we do offer online. If you have any questions about the URLs, simply look in the show notes on this page, here on this YouTube page, and that'll be able to take you where you need to go to. Other than that, I hope you enjoy the show, and it's great to have another listener to the Documentary Life. Have a great day. Microphone check, 1, 2. XCC, hello and welcome. XCC, hello and welcome.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells by the seashore. There we go, rolling.
The best climbers here in Boulder would go up and do these Herculean feats up on the cliffs and then come down and, bag groceries at the grocery store, work at the, at the pizza shop. And that was what really drew me to it, was just these unknown superheroes in my mind. Just that people can go do these things that are like what LeBron James are doing on some level, but then they just nobody, they come back and they just in society, they just are the most humble people.
Hello and welcome to The Documentary Life, a show that sets out to inspire and inform you on how to best live and lead your own documentary life. I am your host, Chris G. Parkhurst, and this is episode number 99. And it is brought to you by Barong Films, proud creators of documentary film, the Documentary Life podcast, and the Documentary Academy, our industry-changing A to Z documentary filmmaking program that will transform you into the documentary filmmaker that you've always wanted to be. Find out more at thedocumentarylife.com/academy. Speaking of being humble, including today's episode, over the last couple of months, we've had on the program two filmmakers representing two films that I wouldn't normally have had much interest in watching. More than that, I might have often had some preconceived notions or even, dare I say, some slight judgments about the material, or maybe more appropriately, judgments about the types of filmmaking involved or filmmakers attached to this type of material. The first of which was episode number 99, where we spoke to Bing Liu, the doc filmmaker behind Minding the Gap, a film about skateboarders. But most certainly not a film about skateboarders, if that makes sense. Bing's film, as I should have guessed, since so many in the doc community were raving about it, it was about so much more than following a few skateboarders. It had story, it had depth, it had humanity. And hey, turns out I like those things. So Bing's film should have been an eye or heart opener for me in terms of having certain ideas attached to certain types of films or filmmakers. But sure enough, when my younger sister reached out to me a couple of months back about this climbing doc, a documentary called The Dawn Wall, that was apparently all the rage, I was only mildly interested. Actually, I kind of scoffed at the notion that, one, my little sister would point out a documentary to me that I didn't know about, and two, that a climbing doc was going to appeal to anyone who, wasn't a climber. And for the record, I actually had a brief period of my life where I was climbing. I even wrote and directed a digital feature that took place in a rock climbing community. But I was fairly certain that if I watched this film, I was probably just going to be seeing some dudes on a rock face saying rad or radical or dude a lot, high-fiving chalked hands, all the while being filmed in uber hip droney fashion or GoPro-esque types of ways. The edits would be fast-paced, in-your-face over music beds of really bad wannabe punk music made by 20-year-olds who wouldn't know a Minor Threat record if Billy Joe Armstrong had flung it at them. See, I can be a total snob. About music, about books, about doc films. But you'd think I would have learned a lesson about that with Bing's film in my conversation with him. Well, if I did, apparently it was a short-lived one. So it took one Mr. Peter Mortimer and his film The Dawn Wall to put me to rights again. Peter's story from going from a geology student to a rock climber to running a company and festival of some of the most recognizable and beautiful climbing films in the world, coupled with the story of his chief subject, Tommy Caldwell, who went from being a skinny nobody to one of the hottest climbers around, to being kidnapped at gunpoint in Kyrgyzstan, to attempting one of the singularly most difficult free climbs on planet Earth. Well, yeah, once again, for like the zillionth time in my life, I have been humbled. I'm hopeful that this time, maybe finally, I will learn from it. So when we come back from a quick word from our sponsor, as well as a brief special webinar announcement, I'm going to sit down with Mr. Peter Mortimer. It's actually one of my more favorite conversations that I've had in quite some time. I think you'll enjoy it every bit as much as I did. So thank you, Doc Lifer, for once again joining me here on this podcast that we've all come to know, love, and be humbled by. This podcast and this life that we're all living, simply known as the documentary life. Next Friday, the documentary life will be marking a major milestone. After 2.5 years of doing this show, we'll be hitting our 100th episode of the podcast. By now, you've probably already heard that this episode will be our final episode of Season 1, and that we'll be taking a short hiatus of 3 months and returning next year for Season 2. Now, this doesn't mean we won't still be providing informative and inspiring content for you. We're still going to be supporting your doc filmmaking goals, just on other platforms like the Documentary Life blog and the Documentary Life YouTube channel, where we'll be providing you with the topics, tips, and know-how that you've been asking for, as well as other valuable resources and insight. We'll also be taking this time to get to finishing our own documentary film, Elvis of Cambodia. And we'll be documenting the experience to share with you as we do. We want to invite you into the process of the making of our film. So we'll be sending you updates via the TDL weekly newsletter, the TDL blog, our social media platforms, as well as our YouTube channel. We want you to be experiencing firsthand the making of our documentary film. You'll have an opportunity to learn from our experiences, and we'd also love to hear any suggestions or encouragement you might have for us. If you'd like to be kept up to date, you should definitely subscribe to the TDL newsletter by going to the documentarylife.com website. It's certainly going to take some getting used to, this not creating a show every week. You know how much I love doing it and connecting with you Doc Lifers. But I assure you, we'll be back bigger and more badass than ever before. We can't wait for you to see what we'll have in store for you for Season 2 of the show. Please know we have an incredible amount of gratitude for you, Doc Lifer, and Steph and I will see you next week for the finale of Season 1 of the Documentary Life. I have the pleasure here of bringing onto the program filmmaker Peter Mortimer. Peter, welcome to the Documentary Life podcast. Very excited to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So a big part of what we will certainly talk about is your current film, The Dawn Wall, and even maybe a bigger conversation will be outdoor adventure or climbing documentary films as a whole. But before we get to that, Peter, what I'd love to understand from you a little bit, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. When and how did documentary film happen for you?
Yeah, so I got into filmmaking right as I was finishing college. I was studying geology at Colorado College here in Colorado, where I still live. And my last class, as I was doing my geology thesis, was a filmmaking workshop. I had one spare class and I could do whatever I wanted. And so I got to make these videos at the same time I was doing my thesis in geology. And it was so clear to me that I was destined for the arts and not the sciences.
In your last course of your senior year.
Last course of my senior year. And I just loved everything about it, the storytelling and the collaboration and the freedom and just everything that science is not, which I have just the deepest respect for scientists and so many of my friends in that world. But it's really hard. You really have to stick to the facts and really analyze the data, and storytelling is just, there's so much more freedom,
latitude.
And I moved to New York for a few years and got my feet wet and was just absorbing as much as I can. And then I went back to grad school at USC, which is a very, much more Hollywood mainstream oriented film school. But I was doing documentary projects at the time, and I just, being there reconfirmed for me how much I loved the documentary filmmaking. And so as I came out of there, just more set in my path.
And so from there, Peter, when do you start making, I'm assuming you're making some doc films, obviously, throughout your time at USC. From there, where do you go in terms of your doc filmmaking?
Yeah, well, my filmmaking, so, people always say, make films about what you know.
Yes.
And when I was in New York, that was a whole new world for me. I grew up in Colorado and in the outdoors. And so I was absorbing so much, but I wasn't making anything. And so I really, I was just like, what do I know? What do I know? And I had the idea to make a rock climbing film. I'd grown up rock climbing, and I was still climbing a lot. And a friend of mine and I, when we were growing up, we dreamed of doing this really scary climb here in Colorado. And then we were like, I was like, it's time for you to do it, and I'm going to make a film about it.
Oh, wow.
So that was the first, and it was
this
really
sounds very familiar, by the way.
Totally. Yeah. And it was really so this was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I've made, we still make rock climbing and outdoor films.
You've made a few films since then.
I've made a few films since then. At the time, I thought it was just a one-off thing. I did it as I was finishing the application to film school. I had a little bit of time in there, and it really was that thing where it just starts with this seed of an idea, and then just step by step, it's organically grown into, really becoming a thing, the outdoor adventure films that we make.
And you doing this, the initial one 20 years ago, can I ask what format you shot this on?
Yeah, I shot it on the Canon XL1.
The XL1, baby.
Still my favorite camera.
I love the form factor. It's so fun to use.
It's so cool. It just holding that camera and just the look and feel of it. It's a beautiful camera.
Yeah. And quite frankly, cameras have gotten so completely away from that form factor.
I love that term, form factor.
Yeah, it's like, thanks for making boxes, guys. Thanks for the box.
It's funny how that's changed.
Yeah, it really is. So you made it with the XL1. And what did you do? I'm curious, early on, it being sort of your first foray into a longer length doc. What did you do with the doc at that point?
Yeah, so I had gone around the town of Boulder where I'd grown up, and I knew a lot of people from climbing. And I was back here at my parents' house while I was trying to get in school, and I made a short film, like a 5-minute video with some friends, and I put together a proposal. And I sent it around to all the local outdoor shop and the local climbing gym and a company that made climbing shoes. I mean, Boulder is really, even at that time, was the hub of climbing in America.
Totally.
And I asked them each for $1,500, and I think I raised about $10,000. Wow. And one of the companies that I went to was Climbing Magazine, which was the big climbing magazine. And in exchange for instead of giving me money for the film, they were going to run a full page ad in the magazine.
Wow.
And then they also wanted to put on a screening event here in Boulder.
Brilliant.
And so they put this event together. And they rented out the Boulder Theater, which is a 1,000-seat theater. At the time, it just seemed like the
Peter, did they agree to,
thing.
I got to ask you, did they agree to do this before even seeing your film or after seeing the film?
Well, they had seen my short film.
Okay.
And so, no, this was all based on a proposal. And I mean, this is a very, I mean, climbing at the time was a very grassroots, close-knit community.
Yes.
I mean, it was not what rock climbing now has. I just heard they have 5 million participants. Like, it's bigger than surfing.
That's
in
amazing.
Participation.
Yeah.
It's going to be an Olympic sport in 2020. People like Alex Honnold and like Tommy Caldwell, these guys are becoming household names.
Yeah.
This was not, climbing was like, the best climbers here in Boulder would go up and do these Herculean feats up on the cliffs, and then come down and, bag groceries at the grocery store.
That's right.
At the pizza shop. And that was what really drew me to it, beyond just loving to do it, was just these unknown superheroes in my mind. I mean, I've always loved that counterculture, and just that people can go do these things that are like what LeBron James are doing on some level, but then they just like nobody, they come back and they just like in society they just are the most humble.
That's right. Yeah.
People. So Climbing Magazine, they ran the full page ad, and they rented this theater out in Boulder. And it was really funny because it was a 1,000-seat theater, and there was no precedent for this in the climbing world. And so we had no idea if people were going to show up. My parents were so terrified about me being humiliated by showing my film in an empty 1,000-seat theater. They bought 50 tickets and invited like all of their friends. And so they said, okay, at least there'll be 50 old people sitting here in the front of the theater cheering.
Who will never go out climbing ever.
They'll never go out climbing. And I remember it was a December night and it was snowing. And I think, we had sold about 200 tickets ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. Like, we're not going to embarrass ourselves.
That's
and
right.
I
It's great.
went up to the theater, and there was a line around the block, like literally around the block. Like the line made a full square block, and they sold out the theater.
Yeah.
And they turned away 200 or 300 people. Like,
Yeah.
I'm really not exaggerating.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just this crystallizing moment. Like, okay, this subculture, this underground community is so passionate. People are, they are willing to stand in the snow to go see some video that's from some guy they've never heard of, just to like go out and, and celebrate and be a part of this. And so that really is the seed. I mean,
wow.
of everything we've built, is that not only in Boulder is there that community, but like in every town across the world.
Right.
So that's really what we've been building over the last 20 years, is just connecting with those communities.
Amazing. And so how soon after that, Peter, did you realize, okay, you know what? Not only was this certainly my calling, but these are the types of films that I'm going to do now. How soon was it after that that you really sort of formally sort of made that decision, whether it's through founding Sender Films or what have you? How soon after that experience did that happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it still hasn't. I'm still like, is this really am I still going to keep doing this?
Yeah.
I think what happened was, so that experience was right before I went to grad school. And then, at US.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that was all happening and then, so, at USC, you get really exposed to mainstream Hollywood in a wonderful way. I mean, the people who come in as guest speakers in your classes are, the great screenwriters and agents and directors and producers. And so I was seeing that, and I did an internship at MGM Studios. And at the same time I was doing that, which was really exciting, I was also starting to get attention in the climbing world. Yeah. And companies were coming to me with small budgets and saying, hey, we would you be interested in, going
Yeah.
out with some of our athletes and doing a film type thing?
Right.
And so I was kind of balancing these two worlds when I was at USC.
So were you
And then
accepting those projects then?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I would go do a summer project,
Right.
or I'd go out, and I mean, they were kind of smaller projects. But then coming out of USC right at that time, I did get, I think it was maybe $50,000 or $60,000 to go do like a 45-minute film. And at that time, the way I was doing this was like, it was me, and I would often invite out a buddy to shoot a second camera with me.
Right.
And then I would just take the stuff back and edit it on my computer. And I mean, the quality was so, like, even I look back at the filmmaking now, and it's like, I can't even show that stuff to people. But there was something about the spirit and, and just the wide-eyedness and just my love and passion and the care. I think right away, like, climbing is just so full of characters.
Right. Right.
And then you're in these incredible locations that, people haven't seen. And, we were really trying to do some cool high angle filming and just bring different perspectives to it. And so it was.
And then the GoPro came out, and that changed everything.
I know. That's totally. And I mean, there's been the GoPro, and then now, I mean, drones.
Yeah.
In the last few years have been the most shocking change.
That's right.
In the outdoor space.
So, are you calling yourself Sender Films at this point, this early on, or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I kind of started calling myself Sender Films. The big evolution for us was I had a friend who I'd gone to college with who went to Columbia Journalism School, but he was a climber too. And I brought him out. His name is Nick Rosen. And I brought him out for 6 months to live in my house. I moved back to Boulder after grad school and to write on a film with me. I was working this project. I wanted him to come in as a writer. And
was this a doc project or a narrative?
It was a doc project, but just to really help we had some narration and some just really help with the weaving of the script and just the interviews and just try to take the storytelling to the next level.
Yeah.
And that was 15 years ago, and he's a full partner of mine at Sender Films. And then I had another friend, Josh Lowell, who was on the East Coast, who was making climbing videos. And
I see. Okay.
So he and I, this was a couple years later, we just, we're kind of collaborating, and we climbed together, and we were good friends. And then we had the idea for the Real Rock Tour, which was combining, his films and my films and starting an annual film tour.
Right. And
so that was 14 years ago. And that's kind of become that's the foundation of a lot of what we do.
So in talking about the Real Rock Films, was it always meant to be part of a tour, an annual tour that you would do with Real Rock? Or were these films that were made to be distributed prior to a tour, if that makes sense? Because if you, I guess what I mean is when you go to your website, right, you can purchase any one of these Real Rock films. So which came first, the distribution on the website or the tours?
Yeah. So the idea with the Real Rock Tour was that this would be the theatrical world premiere of all of our new content.
I gotcha.
And so we essentially became a distribution company.
That's right.
As well as a production company when we started Real Rock. And I love the distribution side of it. I love thinking about it and strategizing. And
not many filmmakers say that. That's brilliant.
Yeah. And one of the cool things about it is that we bring in other filmmakers in the space.
Yeah.
And Real Rock has become, so now we do 500 cities across the world each year. I think 150,000 people come out to the Real Rock to this actual screenings each year.
Unbelievable.
And so it's become the biggest venue for climbing and content.
Yeah.
And so what's really neat is all the athletes want to be on it. You know, a lot of the sponsors want to support it and have presence there. And then filmmakers who have ideas in this space come to us. So we get pitched, you know, probably 40 or 50 ideas per year. And the last couple of years, half of the Real Rock content has come from other filmmakers.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant.
So we bring them, and we still curate the whole thing. I mean, we have, you know, we are filmmakers. We don't want to just completely turn it over. But we bring them in, and then, you know, we kind of almost act more as executive producers in a perfect situation.
That's got to be so gratifying to be not only early involved in that community, but now you're really shaping it in many ways, and people are coming to you and they're creating works of art based on being inspired by your festival in many ways.
Oh man, it is. So the climbing community has grown so much in the last 20 years. It is like, I mean, I think as filmmakers, we've been incredibly lucky to, in some ways, we're riding this wave that was already happening because of climbing gyms and just, you know, all these brands, like right when we were starting, these brands like Patagonia and the North Face and Cliff Bar were just starting to sort of break out of the core and selling this image of climbing and these, you know, same image in our films. And so on the one hand, I do feel like we're, you know, really like we're able to contribute to that. And that feels, you know, really redeeming. On the other hand, we've been so lucky to ride this wave of watching this sport go from a tiny subculture that was really underground to, you know, and I mean, according to the metrics, like bigger than surfing in some ways.
When you see El Capitan for the first time, I mean, it takes your breath away.
Early in the morning, there's this one panel of the wall that illuminates first, the dawn wall.
It has never been climbed until Tommy Caldwell came along. Nobody had actually considered trying it.
It's like stepping off the edge of the earth.
I guess the question here is, why are you doing this?
I was this very fragile little kid.
He didn't crawl till he was over 2.
I think my dad felt the best way to prepare this kid for the world was to toughen him up a little bit. And so he took me on all the craziest climbing walls you could ever do, and he did it with a 6-year-old. By the time I was 14 or 15, there was climbs that I could do that my dad couldn't.
Tommy became one of the best young climbers.
And then we got invited to Kyrgyzstan to rock climb. And all of a sudden, we were hostages.
After being held captive for 6 days, 4 young Americans confront the ultimate choice: to kill or be killed.
He saved our lives.
But he became a different person.
Ever since Kyrgyzstan, I just have this fire in me. This has always been my safe place, my way to deal with life. And I was looking across at the dawn wall, the last unclimbed big swath of stone. I decided maybe that could be climbed. I needed a partner.
Kevin, he was one of the best in the world, at only up to about 30 feet.
But everybody else thought I was crazy.
At this point, I have no idea what I'm getting into. It's about to consume 6 years of my life.
This is a pipe dream, man. Come on.
Nothing left to do but just take a couple deep breaths.
If Tommy and Kevin can actually do this, it will be, come on, the most difficult climb ever done. And it's going to go on day after day.
Suddenly, the whole world was watching.
You okay, man?
And one of them stuck. It was pretty clear that that was it.
I don't want to hold you back.
Maybe this climb really was impossible. We are capable of so much more than we could ever imagine.
Let's turn our conversation to your recent feature-length documentary project, The Dawn Wall, which is making all kinds of noise, not only in the climbing community, but in documentary period. And I have recently just finished watching the film, and I have to say, I don't even know how to preface this, Peter, but when I first learned about this film, actually, I owe this to my sister, who is a big climber, and her and her husband have been climbing for years, and she reached out to me, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and informed me of the Dawn Wall. And my initial reaction was like, "Oh yeah, sure, Joe, great, another climbing doc. That's just what I want to watch," and sort of having this idea in my head what climbing docs were, and I almost sort of equated it to like skateboarding docs. I'm like, it's not going to hold my interest. It's just going to be a bunch of like GoPro and drone footage and certain types of dudes, and so I had this sort of idea in my head, right? And then I watched your trailer, and then of course I pretty quickly contacted you, and it's because of what I saw in the trailer and because of what I have since seen in this film, and it is so much broader and so much more human than I think that certainly than what I was thinking and what I have just described. And it is a powerful film. It is a powerful story. And I'm excited to talk with you about it.
That's so cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely my favorite film to share that we've ever done. I mean, it's the biggest story we've ever tried to tell.
I can only imagine. So why don't we start this part of the conversation off with you giving us a synopsis, a short synopsis. Tell us what the Dawn Wall is about, and then how you started to become how this started to become a film for you from the very beginning.
Yeah. So the Dawn Wall is, in some ways, it's the story of Tommy Caldwell and his journey to do the hardest, so the most significant rock climb of our generation.
Yeah.
It's really a climb that people will talk about 100 years from now as like a generation defining climb. It's also, that's kind of what it started as. It also became a buddy movie between Tommy, who's a legendary climber, and his partner, Kevin Jorgensen, who was a young sort of upstart who joined on with Tommy, and they almost started as an odd couple.
Yeah, that's right.
through the years, they made these incredible sacrifices for each other in order to achieve this climb. And I think what I love about the film is that, the message of, there's so many messages in there I love, but what I love is that it becomes not about the success on the climb, but about the significance of relationships and partnerships.
It sure does.
And what people will do for other people. And so, I think it's sort of, we spent 2.5 years after they finished the climb, editing, and we just kept going and going, and our distributors were like, I think it's good. And we're like, it's not good. And the number of times we said to ourselves, we're never going to get to tell another story like this. We have to get this right. We have to take what they did on, they spent, and I can go into more detail, but they spent 7 years.
That's right.
Trying to puzzle together how to do this climb, and then actually to be able to do it. And so we felt like we owed it to those guys and to ourselves to, put in the time it took to.
Well, and that's just it there, Peter. You're really hitting on something there for us doc filmmakers, which is we spend these sometimes extraordinary amounts of time telling someone's story or a group of people's stories. And there is a sense of, at some point, when you spend so much time with another person or person's telling their story, as a filmmaker, you really start to have the sense that, or at least I do, and I know a lot of filmmakers feel this way. It's an honor to be able to film and tell someone's story, number one. And secondly, because of that, it's not something that we doc filmmakers take lightly. And we know that, in many ways, this is our shot to tell that person or person's story. And that's a really important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely. And I think once you've captured the essential elements of that story on camera, yeah, it becomes your story. So
That's right. That's right. Now, how do you get someone like Tommy Caldwell to agree to do this doc? I mean, I imagine there could have been any number of people who would have loved to have done this story. Why did Tommy allow you guys to film?
yeah, so Tommy was someone who, as a teenager, he became a climbing prodigy and became quite a public figure
Yeah.
in the very small world of climbing. And we began filming with him, years before he began this journey.
Wow.
I mean, his whole life led to this journey, but really before
Yeah.
he focused in on the Dawn Wall. And so we had done short films for the Real Rock Tour and for our other films. My partner, Josh Lowell, had a very close relationship with Tommy. And it was just kind of, I think up to that time, people outside of the climbing world weren't particularly interested in trying to follow Tommy the way we were.
Right.
And we were his friends.
Yeah.
We were just part of this community. And so when he dove into the Dawn Wall, as we lay out in the movie, it was a really dark time in his life. He'd gone through a divorce, and he'd had a couple like really harrowing life experiences, including chopping one of his fingers off, which is like a pianist chopping a finger off for a climber. It's it's one of the most important appendages on your body.
Right.
And
not to mention one particular backstory that is just astounding for anybody who doesn't know what has happened.
Yeah. So he had, I mean, just to delve into that a little bit, he, when he was just out of his teenage years, had gone on his first international expedition to Kyrgyzstan, which is this sort of beautiful paradise of granite walls between in the Balkans, or east of the Balkans a little. I don't know exactly how you describe that region. And while they were climbing there, they were taken hostage by a rebel group that was basically fighting with the Kyrgyz government. And they were used as human soldiers in this week-long, or human shields in this week-long battle between the rebels and the government, as they were sort of just like journeying through the mountainside.
Yeah.
The rebels were trying to hide from the government. I mean, it's kind of a crazy story. And at one point, the group of 4 climbers were left alone with one of the rebels on a mountain pass. And they saw this as a chance to push the rebel off and escape. And nobody was able to take action. The other climbers in the group were older, more experienced, just had been through a lot more, but it was this, they weren't able to take action like I imagine I would not have been able to. And Tommy, as sort of the youngest and simplest, realized that this was the opportunity, and he was the one to do it. And so he pushed the rebel off a cliff.
That's right.
And they ran to safety. This was a major life-defining event for Tommy. He, was both sort of haunted by it, but also empowered by it.
Yeah.
And I think that's often what happens in traumatic situations, is the person who takes action comes out more empowered than the people who were more victims of the situation. And Tommy, who sort of sees the world through the vessel of climbing, I think realized coming out of this that he had the potential to do so much more than he thought he did before that experience. And he applied that to climbing. And, that was sort of, again, years before the Dawn Wall, but the beginning of him going from
the beginning of that journey for sure.
Yeah. Before that, he was a climbing prodigy. After that, he was, a generation defining athlete.
Yeah.
And,
well
but
said.
So many more ups and downs that, led him to sort of, I mean, when he went to the Dawn Wall, so he was 29, I believe, when he'd gone through a divorce, and he kind of lost everything in his life. And he went through he threw himself wholeheartedly into the Dawn Wall. And, it was at the time the impossible climb.
That's right.
Like, no one imagined it would be climbed, and no one, even us, didn't think that Tommy would do it.
Oh, wow.
I mean, really, we thought
that's an interesting point, and I'll stop you there because, as the filmmaker, Peter, or filmmakers, are you thinking, okay, well, what do we do with this? Are you shaping at all a story in your minds whereby Tommy is not successful? Or are you like, this hinges on his success? How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, I can't remember, but because there's something about Tommy, and if you know Tommy, if you get to ever sit down with him, which I hope you do at some point, he's just a guy you bet on. He's just a guy who you're like, it almost transcends like success or failure. Like when he's passionate about something and he's allowing you to film that or partake in that,
wow,
you just do it. And so we never tried to find funding for the film. Every year he would go up there and, we would take our core crew. So we wouldn't bring a lot of outside people in. We'd do it as
tell us who the core crew is, what the makeup is.
Yeah. So it was Josh Lowell, my partner, his brother, Brett Lowell, who's our main cinematographer.
Okay.
Corey Rich, who's a photographer and an outdoor photographer and has a really successful commercial business and is also a good friend. Kyle Burkumpis, myself, Nick Rosen, just those of us who are essentially willing to invest time with minimal financial investment, and just wanted to be a part of it. And so we would go up there and film with him. He would go up on the wall and sort of swing around. He'd live up there for weeks on end.
Yeah.
And we were just like, we don't know where this is going, but we've got to follow.
Lately, we here at the Documentary Life podcast have been really ramping up our free live webinar events. It's a great way to learn the aspects of doc filmmaking from the experts in the field, as well as engage directly with the expert in a live Q&A setting. We've already had some great sessions so far, and our one coming up on December 4th will be no different. A few short weeks ago, it was episode 94, we had on the show acclaimed doc filmmaker and author John Reese. John is the author of Think Outside the Box Office, a book that details his and others' experiences with independent film distribution, a subject that John has since become recognized as a veritable expert on. Not surprisingly, this was an episode that was pretty popular, speaking to a lot of the DIY sensibilities of you doc lifers. And so we've invited him to host a live webinar with us to further explore the subject of documentary distribution, to be followed by a live Q&A session in which you get to ask any and all of your pressing distro questions, of which I know that there are many. I get your emails and I see your posts in the TDL Community Facebook group. There always seems to be a desire to break the code of distribution of our films. If you'd like to attend this live event, which happens on Tuesday, December 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the US, simply go to thedocumentarylife.com to sign up. I'll post a link up in the show notes for this episode, and you can also find links to it throughout the Documentary Life website. Attending and participating in the live event is free to all listeners of the program. You just need to make sure and sign up by, again, going to thedocumentarylife.com. This is going to be a great opportunity for you, Doc Lifer, to engage directly with a film distribution expert. So get your questions ready and sign up today. Okay, hands up. Who here is living a documentary life? Would you say that you are? What does it mean to live a documentary life anyway? Well, we'll happily give you our definition. To us, living your documentary life means that you have crafted your lifestyle in a way such that you are able to make the documentary films you choose to make without it negatively impacting other aspects of your life, be that financial, your immediate relationships, or personal wellness. And furthermore, through the creation of your art, your existence is sustainable, creative, and fulfilling. Would you say this describes you? If not, is this something that you want for yourself? It was what we wanted for ourselves, and it took us quite a while to achieve it. Truthfully, there were many times we didn't think we'd make it at all. We were living in a world that was reactive rather than proactive, and it was costing us greatly. If any of this resonates with you, we'd like to help you find a better way. Because once we were able to honestly say we were living our documentary lives, we could look back and see what had gotten us there, and we knew we had to share it with others. We broke it all down and put it into Living Your Documentary Life, a program that helps you to craft your own lifestyle, relationships, and mindset in ways that empower you to make your best documentary films. You can find out more at thedocumentarylife.com/yourdoclife.
Come on, Tommy. Come on.
What might be helpful, I think, here is I would love to visualize literally what this looks like in terms of setups. So if Tommy is up on the dawn wall doing his thing, where are you guys and how are you, like, where are you guys positioned and how are you getting set to do that? Because obviously you're not climbing up per se with him. Are you guys rappelling down from the top to get into your positions? How does this look?
Yeah. So the dawn wall is 3,000 feet of dead vertical to overhanging rock. If you stood on top of the dawn wall and dropped a rock from the top, it would land a couple hundred feet out from the base of the wall. I mean, it's really sheer. I believe it's the longest, sheerest rock face on planet Earth.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I don't think there's anything as clean and beautiful as the dawn wall. And what's amazing, it's in Yosemite National Park on El Capitan, and you can actually hike around to the top.
Yeah.
So you actually can stand at the top and drop a rock off, and people illegally base jump off the top of it all the time. And I mean, it's one of the most spectacular formations on Earth.
Yeah.
And so when Tommy started, he was by himself. So he hiked around the top and rappelled in. So he hiked around with, loads and loads of gear. He probably did multiple trips and brought, a couple 100 pounds of gear up there, including thousands of feet of rope. And he rappelled down right to the middle of the wall, which is the blankest, sheerest part. And that he knew if one day he would ever be able to climb the dawn wall, he would have to figure out how to get across this section.
That's the traverse section, right?
The traverse, at the time, he didn't even know it was going to be the traverse. He was just like, there's just this big, like 500 feet up and 500 feet across, like truly, truly blank, like pane of glass blank. And so I say pane of glass, but it's granite, and granite does have texture, and it does have little dike veins and little cracks that form and stuff. So there were things, but it was blanker than anything anyone had ever climbed or dreamed of climbing.
Right.
So he went right to the hardest part, and he set up a portaledge, which is a hanging cot that fastens to the side of the wall that you can sleep inside. It's like a tent that hangs from the wall. And so he was sleeping inside of there. And then when our film crew was with him, we would do the exact same thing. We would bring our own ropes. We would hike up to the top, rappel in, and set up our hanging cot right next to him. And then what he would do is at night he would sleep in the tent, and then in the morning he would have these ropes, and he would either go up the rope with geomars, or he would rappel down the rope to the section of the wall that he wanted to practice and to try to figure out. And we would just get into position. And, and again, I say my actual filming on the wall was so minimal compared, Brett Lowell was really the main, Brett and Josh Lowell were really the main cinematographers on the wall.
Yeah.
And so they would get into position and, you know, sometimes hang out there for 7 or 8 hours in the same spot and just filming, you know, and that was kind of at the beginning. And then Kevin Jorgensen joined Tommy.
Yeah.
And then it was the two of them trying together. And then that's great because you have the dynamic and the relationship and, you know, they're trying to work it out together. And that went on for 7 years.
So every summer, everybody's getting ready for their trip out to Yosemite, huh?
Yeah. And it's actually not in the summer because in the summer it gets so hot there. You can't climb. So it was in the fall and the spring.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that Tommy and Kevin realized was that the colder the rock, the better. So they kept going later and later into the fall.
Yeah, and later into the night.
And later into the night. Yeah. So when we were filming that, I mean, so for the first couple of years, it was just like, this is amazing. And we're always self-funding it. And, you know, it was an investment of time and as little money as possible. And then we would sometimes, like, I remember we sold a little footage to like a tourism agency one year.
Yeah.
We put a couple short films on Real Rock because the whole climbing world was talking about, you know, is Tommy ever, you know, he basically bet his entire career on this thing.
Yeah.
And it was like, is he gonna do this? No way. And so we would put little update short films on the tour to about his progress, you know, from that year's filming. And it wasn't until so in 2014 or 2015, it was right at the end of the year. They started on December 28th, and it wasn't until they did it. So they started December 28th, and they spent 19 days on the wall, sleeping. And they started at the bottom, and they climbed every single pitch, without falling. I mean, sometimes they would fall on a pitch, and they'd go back to the beginning of that pitch. They climbed every single pitch continuously to the top. When they were halfway up the wall on day 8, a writer for the New York Times did a story that ended up on the front and center of their website.
Yeah, it was changed everything.
Cover of their sports page, and it all of a sudden it brought international attention to the climb. And then this, you know, I'll leave it to the viewer, to people to watch the film to find out. But this incredible drama unfolds
up there in the Trevor section.
Yeah.
You know, can I ask you, as a filmmaker, you know, suddenly the eyes of the world are on this story, and here you guys have been up here for over 6 years filming, right? Or however long you guys were filming. And one, are these outlets reaching out to you for footage? And two, how are you just dealing with this whole media onslaught?
So one, yes, the outlets were reaching out to us for footage, and we tried to accommodate them where we thought it was appropriate. A lot of the coverage was great. You know, the New York Times coverage was really smart. They were doing 3D models of the film and stuff. And then there was a whole nother layer of coverage that was just like hilariously confused.
It's in the film, right?
Yeah. And we had some fun with that in the film because I think that's a funny part of the story.
Yeah.
Because that's, you know, that it is, climbing has rules. It's like chess, you know, there's rules of the game. And if you don't understand the rules of the game, it can be a little bit opaque to an outsider. And so we, and then my partner Josh was running our film team on the ground, and he kind of became the point person for all the media.
Okay.
Because they were trying, you know, you do have cell reception on the side of El Capitan.
Yeah. And
so everyone was contacting Tommy and Kevin. And at some point it's like, we got to keep the world off the wall.
Yeah.
Like that is the hallowed space of the climbers and our intimate film crew. And we just had to keep the world off the wall. And they coordinated with Josh, who was on the ground, and then any media or anything went through him. You know, what was great about it is that after they did the climb, all of a sudden this documentary that we had been self-funding for 7 years, had no idea what was going to come of it. You know, we basically had every, we had offers for the film from all sorts of people. And, you know, we had sold our last film to Discovery Channel, and, you know, they wanted to buy it. And, you know, we ended up at that time selling the film to Red Bull Media House.
Right.
And so that was great. You know, it's helped us get the film out to the world in a bigger way, and to, you know, make some money from our, you know, investment of time.
Exactly. And tell us, how is it out into the world in a bigger way right now?
So the life of the film. So we spent essentially 3 years in post-production, piecing the film together, because we had to interweave, you know, Tommy's backstory with this 19-day ascent, and Kevin's backstory as well, and the 7 years of those guys trying the climb together. And so that was a real puzzle. And that was just, you know, I think we have 150 different versions of how we weaved that together before we landed on something that we really liked. And, you know, we were bringing in doc filmmakers. Like there's a guy, David Zeef. I don't know if you know him, but he's an amazingly smart, like, doc filmmaker out of New York. And, you know, he would do like a week consultation with us. And,
wow.
And he knows nothing about climbing. I mean,
brilliant. Yeah.
And he's just like, what the heck? And I remember we had one test screening at a friend's house here, and there was about 25 people there. And I think 20 of them knew about climbing, or maybe 15 knew about climbing, and 5 knew a little bit, and 5 knew nothing. And the climbers in this test screening were like, that's the best. Oh my God, that's the biggest film. That's the best film we've ever seen. And we go up for a Q&A after, and kind of people were saying that. And then my friend, Michael Eisner, who's another filmmaker, he raised his hands and he says, I have no idea what the hell just happened. Like, Tommy had a baby while he was on the wall for 19 days. Like, what? Like, I mean, he just was like, and everyone was looking at this guy like, what? Are you crazy? And
that's great.
And I looked around, I was like, does anyone else, you know, like, feel the way Michael does?
Yeah.
And, you know, 2 other people who were like not as outspoken as Michael sort of looked around and sheepishly raised their hands. And they were like, we had no idea what that movie was about. And
it's so helpful, isn't it?
Well, so from that point, Michael became my go-to guy. In the next 6 months, he came in once a week or once a month at least, and would do these full day sessions with me. And just, we would pick apart every section of the film where he'd be like, I'm lost. I'm confused. Yeah. I mean, we would just be watching. He'd be like, nope, what? Like, and that was, I mean, I think that along with, you know, some of the work with David Zeef was what got it to be a much more broader film. And
I think it's pretty evident, certainly to someone like myself, in watching this story, of the amount of time and care that you guys took into really not only pulling off the film itself, but even more so the story itself. It is so well done and so clearly thought out, and so much time and energy went into this project. In many ways, not unlike Tommy's journey up on the wall. And I think that's something I really appreciated with the film and the filmmaking aspect of it.
Thank you.
So, Peter, how can we see the film?
So the film came out in mid-September theatrically. We combined Fathom one-night events with a limited release screenings that started in New York and LA. And, you know, that's been doing pretty well for the last couple months. We've passed the $1 million box office threshold, which is a great barometer for a doc. And so on November 20th, it's released on iTunes. And
Fantastic. So this will be released roughly 4 days from the release of this particular episode. I can't wait for really more of the world to see it. It has been a success story on so many levels already. The film is The Dawn Wall. I've been speaking with Peter Mortimer. Peter, what an exciting conversation. Thank you so much for being on the program. Like I said, I look forward to seeing further success with The Dawn Wall as well as what you're doing with Sender Films.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun, and congrats on such a great podcast. It's really cool what you're doing.
Thanks, Peter. Don't forget, if you're looking to live and lead a documentary life, you need to head over to thedocumentarylife.com/yourdoclife and take a look at our Living Your Documentary Life program. We'll help you craft your lifestyle so that you are able to make the documentary films that you want to make and live the doc life you want to live. Thanks again for listening to the show, and remember to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, remember, for any of the URLs that may or may not be outdated and you want to get the most up-to-date information, perhaps for the documentary filmmaking courses, for the blog, for other episodes, just go ahead and check in the show notes below on this YouTube page, and that'll give you the correct URLs to use. Thanks again. Have a great day.